Earl Grolman said this: "The only cure for grief is to grieve." In the midst of loss, we're often unsure of which pain is the worst, the shock of what's happened or the ache of that which will never be. Welcome to this week's Hope from the Hills. The Bible says this: "My flesh and my heart, they fail me, but God is the strength of my heart and my portion forever." That's Psalm 73 and verse 26. Grief is that deep expression of sadness and sorrow that erupts into our lives from the loss of something we both value and love. At any moment, there is a fragility of life that can open up encounters with grief, leaving us to wonder, why me? What part has grief to play in my story? When will my grieving stop? Or indeed, has grief broken in that God himself might find me in my hour of loss and my hour of need? Whether you're facing grief head on or walking beside a grieving loved one, finding God in the midst of these moments is possible. For when you experience grief, God's very real presence comforts you, regardless of that which you've lost. Finding God in the center of our grief allows you to freely grieve whilst holding on to hope and a promise that's bigger than any kind of loss that you may be suffering. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. That's Jesus' own words from Matthew chapter 5 and verse 4. To find God in grief is no way eliminating the feelings and the process you'll have to walk through in order to heal from loss. However, by choosing to place all that we're carrying in a grieving season into his hands, helps to cling to something outside of ourselves that is so much bigger and stronger than our own crushed spirit. Finding God in grief is the beginnings of being able to make that climb over the mountain of sorrow, preventing any of us from being completely debilitated, isolated, or unable to focus our lives, relationships, purpose, or indeed the future days ahead. Not one of us would deny that grief can be overwhelming, but when you feel like you're drowning in grief, reach out to the God of all comfort and let that leap of faith be your lifeline. The Lord is near to the brokenhearted, and he saves those who are crushed in spirit. That's the promise of Psalm 34 and verse 18. We will all go through seasons of grief. Grief comes with no manual, rule book, exact formula or measure. Some navigate slowly the days, seasons and stages of their grief. For others, that time may be significantly shorter. Our mourning will always be a unique and personal journey, embracing many highs and indeed many lows. But finding God in the valleys or mountaintops will always be our greatest resource to make sense of our loss, to recover and to heal. It's in his presence that surrounds these moments, a presence that always guides us back to life and to hope, a real and tangible replacement from the emptiness of loss to the fullness of his love. Regardless of our losses or how we choose to grieve, God will always be the constant to comfort us when we grieve and when we mourn. Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. Psalm 23 this time and verse 4. In these moments of grief, when you're aching, God is near. When circumstances seemingly make it feel that God is distant, he is always and remains intimately close, waiting to move with only the supernatural comfort that he can bring. Grief is physically crushing, it's emotionally draining, and can make the strongest believer question the enduring goodness of a loving God against the backdrop of searing loss. But the truth is, he's always present. He's always there in the darkest moments, full of both comfort and compassion. In your weakness, God can and will always be your strength. Even in those moments when you think you're unable to make just one more decision, face another reminder, or take another inquiring conversation, God will be right there in those moments to meet you in the midst of your grief. In grief, there's fear. A fear that things will never be the same again. A fear that you'll never smile, laugh, or enjoy the fullness of life again. Fear that very present heaviness that you're feeling at the moment will never lift. In those moments, just call out and apprehend the God of all comfort, daring to entrust him with just how you feel, allowing him to drive out those fears and to help you live again. I'll see you next time.